So my name's Eloise. I am an associate at a US law firm in London. And I guess I also do a lot of things in the wellness space. This talk probably isn't going to be as beautifully structured or organised as the previous TED Talks, but I'm just going to give you some thoughts on my journey so far, the kind of things that I do now and why I do them and why I'm passionate about wellness, and then some thoughts about how the legal profession is responding to more of a demand for wellness, especially in the corporate world. So in terms of my background, I always wanted to be a lawyer. Like right from the beginning of studying at sixth form, I knew I wanted to study law at university. When I was much younger, I also had a very extensive musical background because my parents are musicians. So that was an option for a while, but as soon as I decided to focus on my studies, it was really law all the way. And I even knew I wanted to be a solicitor basically, because I like working in teams and I kind of like that environment where you're all coming together and you're much more supported than maybe being a barrister. So I kind of knew my path from quite early on, and because of that, because I knew exactly what it was I wanted to do, I did a lot of different vacation schemes. I went to 7 different firms in the end, doing different types of law, like corporate law, family law, private client, regional, magic circle, all of these kind of things. And in the end, I settled on Cleary Gottlieb, which is a US law firm in London, mainly because small intakes, more individual responsibility, more kind of individual attention in a way, and a lot of opportunity for growth. And I think it has been all of those things. But during my period as a trainee, and then also later, I started to feel is this it? Is this all it is? This job? Because it's so all-consuming, especially if you do go into a corporate law firm. Especially if you're in maybe a corporate law firm that's quite intense amongst the corporate legal world, it can feel a little bit maybe this is it forever. It just feels quite closed off sometimes. It feels like maybe the job is all there and you can't sort of see beyond the next deal, and it's always the intensity is so high that it can start to take over your life a little bit. And that's what I found a few years ago. And then I tried a variety of things to kind of bring some balance and some breadth and some depth back into my life. I trained as a yoga teacher, so I'd actually been practicing yoga for a long time, before I started working in the city. But I decided I wanted to train and then start teaching as well, which is a really different experience. And I also trained in things like Pilates and bars. I was was kind of a fitness instructor, I guess, but also interested in the philosophy side of things. And I did a lot of other courses and sort of trainings, mostly in my vacation actually, which didn't really help with the intensity of life. But it was something that I wanted to explore so that I would feel like I had more to my working life and also my life outside of work. And I also, this is a kind of weird thing that I'm not sure if Alex was expecting me to talk about this, but I also became a monk during that time. So I did a year training to be a monk with the Archbishop of Canterbury. And that was a really interesting program because it was something that I did alongside work. So it was blended into my working life, and the time commitment wasn't huge, but it was more this really deep, in-depth spiritual kind of experience. So to kind of cut a long story short, there was a lot of things that I was trying to find some kind of something else that wasn't just the law, that would give me an experience of really being able to do my working life and also having all of these other things outside of law. So all that is to say that I think a lot of people probably have a similar experience. A couple of years in, you maybe think oh, maybe this is it. Maybe this is just it can seem a little bit like the job is the main thing for life now. And I think it doesn't necessarily need to be the case. So I think there are different ways. There's kind of a variety of ways that you can find balance, and you can also find well-being, whatever well-being means for you, whether it means physical, kind of going to the gym or whatever, emotional, seeing your friends, being in community, mental, meditation or other practices like that, or spiritual, or whatever you're into, your idea of well-being. There are a lot of very practical ways that you can sort of navigate that for yourself, and it doesn't have to look the same from person to person. So I'm maybe going to give you a couple of ideas about where I think the legal profession is going as a whole. And then I thought the most practical thing that I could give for you guys would be my personal idea of like what a toolbox could look like for some wellbeing tips and techniques that you can take into your first legal job if you do decide to go into the legal world. So in terms of where the profession is going, these are a couple of themes that I've been writing about and speaking about for a while, and sort of observing in my firm and also in kind of peer firms. A big focus on wellbeing and mental health, that's pretty obvious. And I think most firms now do have some kind of like mental health or wellbeing committee or some kind of program that they're running for their employees. And I think that's only going to grow more. So there are things like the Mindful Business Charter, where certain law firms have signed up to be a more mindful business, which means that, like, things like not making your employees work the whole weekend or not making them work on vacation, or just being more mindful of how you're treating people that work for you. And a lot of clients will start to sign up to that as well. So one of the problems with wellbeing in the corporate world is that it can't really just be driven from the legal side of things. It has to be like a general kind of corporate movement towards greater enhanced well-being. Because the problem is, if law firms try and lead it and the clients aren't also on board with those kind of ideas, it makes it very difficult to implement the policies, because as lawyers, we're essentially a service business. We're very much orientated on what our clients want and how we can develop that in the best way. So all of these initiatives, there's like different levels of them. There's like the individual, then there's the firm, then there's the wider profession, and then there's the client and the rest of the business world. So yeah, lots of different things, but there will be more initiatives in that direction in the future. Another thing is this idea of the portfolio career. So I spoke about like stuff that I've kind of woven into my very full-time job, and that has often meant like sacrificing kind of holiday or like not having any downtime / like social life, and those have been decisions that I've made for myself in the past. But I think it will be more frequent to have associates or trainees or lawyers in general forming these kind of portfolio careers where maybe they do have passions outside of the work that they do as a lawyer, and they're actually crafting ways to bring those in. So you work like a flexible arrangement, or you work from home, or you have a 4-day week, or whatever it is. And I think these things are going to be more prominent as well in the next few years. And the final thing here is I put whole self-working. I don't really know how to like explain this in a better way. I'm going to think of a better term for it for next time. But the idea is bringing your whole self to work. So you don't just turn up and you're like a robot who like executes a job essentially that will eventually be overtaken by AI, but you are actually a real human being who's engaging on like an emotional level with other people and bringing your interests and your passions in every aspect of your personality, well, maybe not every aspect, but like most aspects of your personality into the work that you do as a lawyer. So I think that is maybe one thing that we're going to see more of, just more of a permission to kind of be yourself and express yourself in different ways, and maybe even like form your career. And some of the other speakers have spoken about like how their own personal interests have now become a fundamental part of their career, and taking that forwards. I think that's going to be more prominent. Final things. So these are like, this is what I thought would be most practically helpful for you guys as either junior lawyers or people who are thinking about wanting to come into law at some point. Or maybe even just thinking about like your first job. A really practical toolbox of like wellbeing tips that have helped on like a day-to-day level for me. Number one is boundaries, like knowing what you do and when you do it, knowing what your priorities are. So number one is my job, and I'm going to put that first. Number two is like yoga teaching, and I do that between this time and this time on this day. Number three is like social life or whatever it is, just knowing what you do and when, and the order of priority that they come in, and sort of having boundaries around those things. So when you're at work and you're doing your job in a very focused way. So that kind of leads on to another thing, which is focus and attention. I think one of the most powerful things in like getting stuff done, or like just being well, like doing things well and like feeling well in yourself, is an ability to focus. So that can be learned through like lots of different attention techniques or like just productivity tools, but also things like meditation or practices where you're just like still and silent, or like focusing on the breath or whatever. Anything that you can do that gives you an ability to cultivate this like very precise sense of attention is going to serve you so well when you want to incorporate more things into your life, because when you're doing one thing, you're really doing it, and then when you're doing the next, you can do that. So I put realistic optimism, which I think is probably what sums up like my life at certain times when I want to do loads of things, but you have to also be realistic about it, saying no to things that you really can't do, saying yes to things that you know that you can commit to. Flexibility, agility, those kind of things, like being flexible in your thinking, being able to be creative with your career. And final thing, I'm being ejected from the stage swiftly, but I want to say that the most important thing, I think, is self-awareness. So like really knowing yourself, knowing what you want, and then being able to articulate it. So those are some scattered thoughts on wellbeing, but I hope you enjoyed it.